We have made it. You have made it. We are into our last unit, the Middle Ages in Europe. You'll notice that you're going to skip a few pages, which means you're going to skip a few chapters. The other chapters that we're not going to look into due to time is going to be the Middle Ages over back in Africa, over in Asia, what was happening in China and in Japan. We probably would have touched on those a bit. We just don't have time. So what we're going to focus on in this last stretch here is the Middle Ages in Europe. And I asked you all to go ahead and give me your thoughts on what you think of. And a lot of you thought of wars, which is correct. One person put the loss of culture and the decline of the ability to read and write, and that is spot on. A lot of people put the fall of Rome, and you are on the right track because the Middle Ages start when Rome falls. And when Rome falls, we know that it was outsiders, invaders, tribes people who were coming in who were not cultured or civilized, and so we get the Dark Ages. And then, a lot of people put the knights in shining armor, you put the castles or dragons, I saw jousting. That is all stuff that does come from the Middle Ages. And when you see the word medieval, that is just the Latin term for Middle Ages, and what they give to the culture that was developed here. There's not going to be a lot of culture going on in the beginning of the Middle Ages, all right? It is a dark time in Europe. And we're really going to focus more on Northern Europe. We're not going to focus so much on the Mediterranean area. That has been sacked and looted, and, we've talked about that. But a lot of what we're going to first kind of look into are the tribes that settled in the heart of Europe, okay? Now, when we start chapter 21, which is where we're at right now, on page 624, the question that is asked, that essential question is, what is power and who should have it? And it's an absolutely amazing question to ask because that's the Middle Ages. What is power? Who should have it? The Roman Empire had power. The Roman Empire lost its power. The tribes came in and had the power. And so we're going to see the result of that in what happens through this 1,000 years that is considered the Middle Ages. Why is it considered the Middle Ages? Because it's the end of the ancient civilizations and the time before the age of exploration, where we now get our new world, America, and we start to have the colonies and we start to have the American history kind of somewhat start. So that's where we are. And when you start 7th grade, you're going to start right here with the colonization of America. So we're talking about this 1,000 years in between when Rome falls and our great age of exploration starts. Okay? So the first thing I want you to do is you are going to read the My Story. Now, this guy's name is Charlemagne. Say it with me. Charlemagne. It looks like a big, long, weird name, but you say it, Charlemagne. And this is one of my favorite stories to have read to you. Gilgamesh was one of them. Justinian was another one I didn't get to read to you. And Charlemagne and Leo was one of my other favorites. And I'm not going to read it to you because you can read it on your own, but I would have done a great job. Here's what you need to know about Charlemagne. Charlemagne was king of the Franks, and they're kind of in the German, what would be German area right now. Charlemagne is a huge guy, okay? And Charlemagne is going to have a visitor that you read about, and Charlemagne is going to come up with a very clever idea for more power. We know that our kings and our leaders who are really intelligent and strategic were often the ones who go down as great. And Charlemagne is no different. In fact, Charlemagne just means Charles the Great. So there you go. He's a huge guy with a lot of power. The friend that comes and visits him is the Pope. Now, we didn't quite get into how the Pope comes into all of this yet. But the Pope is, as I think I've talked about, the head of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church is still very strong. This is still now a Christian area by the civilized people. The tribesmen are all polytheistic, but the civilized world is Christian. Or I should say monotheistic, because you do have the Muslims and the Muslim Arabs who are going around and taking up land. And so he has power himself, the Pope. However, the Pope at the time, Pope Leo III, is in trouble. And so he comes to Charlemagne, who is the most powerful of the kingdoms in Europe, for help. Because here's the thing. This is one of the things that Miss Natalie really never realized, is that when I heard of the Dark Ages, I always thought of this time. I thought of the castles and the knights in shining armor and the dragons and the princess in distress and all that, like you did. But I always thought the Dark Age happened worldwide. I was incorrect. The Dark Age is only happening in Europe because you still have, again, the Muslim Arabs who are advancing. If you watched that, they advanced a lot, or I should say, looked at that slideshow. If we would have gone over into China, they're advancing. Japan, they're advancing. India, they're advancing. The only people who are going through a Dark Age are the Europeans. Didn't realize that. Wasn't taught that, or I didn't pay attention when I was taught that. And of course, that there were multiple Dark Ages throughout history, one with the Greeks, because Dark Ages means you lose the ability to read and write, culture declines. So that is what's going on in Europe. So that's why we are Dark Ages in Europe. Great. So anyway, back to Leo and Charlemagne. So Leo's in trouble because the people don't want him to be Pope. Pope has a lot of power, and he's scared that these people are going to harm him, so he goes to the most powerful kingdom, the Franks, who was under one of the most powerful rulers, Charlemagne. I'm on page 626, and I'm going to read for you where Charlemagne's mind starts to work for his advantage. Second paragraph. It says, as Charlemagne listened to Leo's tale of escape from his enemy, he realized that Leo needed him and that he needed Leo. They could make a trade. When Leo asked for Charlemagne's protection to return to Rome, now this is just a city, not the whole empire that fell, the king patted the hilt of his sword. As a Christian, it is my duty to help and defend the church, he said. But no mere king can restore order in Rome, the capital of the old Roman Empire. Only a new Roman emperor can do that. If you go on, you read that Charlemagne sends some guys, bodyguards, to protect Leo. Back in Rome, no one tries to mess with Leo because of the fact that he has Charlemagne's men with him. And then Charlemagne just happens to come by to say hi in Rome. And it happens to be around Christmas time, which, again, you did the Christianity Search and Find, and you know Christmas is one of their most important holidays because it celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ. And so he is there, he is in service, he is listening and praying. And some historians disagree whether Charlemagne knew this part was going to happen or not, but as Charlemagne was praying and he bowed his head, Leo takes a crown and he places it on Charlemagne's head. And everyone in the church cries out. Because with this doing of a crown on the head from the Pope of Rome, who is the highest official, he is placing the rule and his trust in Charlemagne. Charlemagne knew that he was already a king, so the crown itself didn't give him any more power. However, since the fall of Rome, around 500, no one could say that they were Roman emperor. And that is what Leo did. In that action of putting the crown on Charlemagne's head, he has now crowned a new Roman emperor. Hadn't been done for now almost 300 years. Here's the problem, though. What is power and who should have it? Who has the power? Is it Charlemagne with the crown that no one has had to be the emperor of Rome? Or was it the Pope who put the crown on his head, who gave him that power? That is the big question that I'm going to be asking you. That is what I want you to think of. Because towards the end of this story on page 627, you're going to read in that last sentence, he wondered, meaning Charlemagne wondered, which would prove to be most powerful, the sword of the king of the Franks or the crown of the Roman emperor? So, your assignment is going to be A, to read page 625 to 627, the full story of Charlemagne and Leo. B, you can pass over page 628 and 629 if you would like. 630 is kind of interesting. The map on page 630 shows you all these tribes that are coming in and took over Europe after you had the fall of Rome, or in between the fall of Rome, because you see 300s to 500s. You see where they all come from. You see all of these different tribes people. They are not considered civilized. They live still very much, I don't want to say nomadic, but they definitely don't build things like a civilized world builds things. And so they're coming in, they're taking land. But it is the rise of the Franks who are going to be most powerful. It starts with, it starts a little bit before, but you're going to see that Charlemagne's grandfather was very powerful. And this is where Charlemagne gets his line of kingship from. What you're really going to focus, though, on is then 631 to 633, because this is all on Charlemagne. So to introduce the Middle Ages, I want you to be introduced to Charlemagne. So that's what you're going to do today. Again, you're going to read the My Story on Charlemagne and Leo. If you want to read any of the other pages, go for it. But you do need to focus then on pages 631 to 633 on Charlemagne. Okay? We're going to focus on Charlemagne today. Again, we are in the home stretch. We are in the Middle Ages. It is not nice all the time. It is dark. It is evil. It is going to be quite interesting. But this is it. So we will see you more this week as I continue to instruct you on the Middle Ages.